We started the day with a citizenship ceremony in Nambour, welcoming new Australians as part of the broader Australian family. And we finished the day here in Maroochydore, where we've just had a round table across different agencies, including Border Force, Queensland Police Service and the Australian Federal Police. We know, as wonderful as the Sunshine Coast is, our community is not immune from the scourge of ice and other drugs. It is important, therefore, that we ensure that we have an operation across different agencies working effectively, and it was great to hear the work that they are doing. It doesn't take away our responsibility moving forward as a local community and as community leaders to ensure we're doing everything we can do to ensure that we're giving support to those families who are in need and making sure that our streets are safe. And we do all we can to combat particularly the scourge of ice. So with that, I'll pass over to the Minister.
Well, firstly, Ted, thank you very much for the invitation to be here on the Sunshine Coast. And yes, it has been a busy day, and as you'd expect, we've just had a very successful budget, and national security was a significant element of that budget. I want to pay tribute to Ted O'Brien and indeed to Andrew Wallace for the work that they did on behalf of people here on the Sunshine Coast. There was a massive investment into the Bruce Highway. There has been a significant investment into the Sunshine Coast University and support for the community through other programs that the government's running, particularly in the area of health, but security with the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Border Force being big beneficiaries out of the budget. So I'm really pleased to be here. I think it's been a very important day and a very significant program. Again, I want to add to Ted's words to say thank you to the officers from the Australian Border Force, from the Australian Federal Police and the Queensland Police Service for their briefing. We know as parents that one of the biggest concerns you have, particularly if you've got teenage kids, kids going off to parties, going off to school, the influence of drug, in particular ice, which is the drug of choice among young people, but right across society. It's a killer, it's a scourge, it breaks up families, it destroys lives. And the federal government, along with the state government, the local government, all of us in society, we want to stamp out the influence of that drug, because to feed that habit, people need to break into houses, they need to rob and steal to pay for their drug habit. So the impact of drugs across society is very significant. There are a lot of operations that are underway between the Australian Federal Police, the Australian Border Force and the Queensland Police Service, and already we've seen over 5 tonnes of illicit substances, of ice, amphetamines, drugs otherwise, seized by the Australian Border Force and partners in some operations, with drugs coming across our seaports, through airports, and we're also very worried about drugs coming through the mail as well. So there's a lot of significant investment out of this budget, and that will be of direct benefit to residents here on the Sunshine Coast, whether it's in the national security space or whether it's on the M1 to the south or right up the Bruce Highway up to Caloundra. It's going to be a big win for local residents, and I'm really pleased to be here to talk about it today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Minister, how bad is the drug problem in your perception, in terms of, is it getting worse? Is it getting more pervasive? How would you characterise it?
Detections are certainly up, both the quantity and the numbers, and we are very worried, as I say, given the amount of online shopping, the ability for people to source drugs from all sorts of sources on the dark net, on the internet. It's easy to make those links online through chat rooms and exchange of information on forums and whatnot. So that drug, when it hits the streets, doesn't matter where it is across the country, including here on the Sunshine Coast, if it ends up in the veins of young people, then we do know that it's a huge cost to that individual. It destroys their lives. It's a huge cost to the health system. It's a huge cost to families when they have their houses broken into. But ice is a particular problem. People might think, well, you know, there's social drugs. They are bad enough, but the use of social drugs generally leads into the use of more serious drugs, and ice is a scourge across the Australian community, and the Sunshine Coast is not immune from that. Ted O'Brien wants to do all he can with the Queensland Police and with ABF and with AFP to stamp out the importation the distribution of those drugs, and we're certainly, from a leadership level out of Canberra, determined to make sure that we support those local efforts.
Are you seeing any link between ICE and sort of domestic violence? There's been a real spike in DV on the coast lately, and is that a problem here and in other regions?
Well, there's just no question. The link is there. The use of drugs, including ICE, but the use of any illicit substances and the abuse of alcohol. These are all factors that play out in homes, in workplaces. Domestic violence is a scourge across the country, and again, there's a lot of support that we provide to domestic violence agencies and law enforcement agencies in this budget to provide support to families, to the victims of domestic violence. Families across the Sunshine Coast and across the country tonight will see the influence of drugs on their families, whether it's kids that have taken drugs, whether it's somebody that's under the influence of ICE, involved in domestic violence. There are real impacts on local families, and we want to stamp it out, and anybody that has any information should contact authorities. And again, we need to support our police and health agencies in all of the work that they're doing, because this needs to be a community-driven support for all of those agencies.
Minister, can I ask you about the plight of some elderly residents here on the Sunshine Coast? They're on 410 retirement visas, which have been abolished. Some couples are paying up to $17,500 for health insurance as part of their visa requirements. Is that acceptable?
Well, I feel for those people, because they've come here, they're good people, they've worked hard, and they've come on a visa class, knowing the conditions of the visa, which included that they needed to take out health cover. But as they point out, over a period of time, that coverage is costing more and more money. Now, as I'm advised, there is the opportunity to take out a policy from overseas. It doesn't just need to be a health policy from one of the private health insurers here in Australia. But I've asked my department to make contact with these people, and if you've got the names, we'd be very happy to speak with them, but to have a look at the issue otherwise to see what support we might be able to provide to them, because, as I say, they're good people. They've come here on a visa with the condition that they need to take out health insurance. That cost of the health insurance has increased significantly as they've aged, because the risk is higher. Obviously, health needs become more acute the older you get, and so that's reflected in the price of the policy, and the number of people on that visa class, which now is not open to new entrants, reduces each year. And I'm happy to work with those people.
Because at the moment, excuse me, to achieve permanent residency for some of these elderly people, it's either a $110,000 fee, I believe, or a 30-year wait. Now, because you can imagine people in their 80s probably don't have 30 years to wait. Do you think the government might consider maybe some sort of bridging visa or some alternative pathway to permanent residency for these?
Well, the first assurance, just in terms of the peace of mind for these people, nobody on a 410 visa is going to be kicked out of this country, whether they've got private health insurance or not. I'll make that very clear. It's a limited category, a limited class of people. They are good people. They have worked hard. They contribute to the Sunshine Coast community and in communities across the country. So they should have no fear at all that they're going to be deported or have their visas cancelled. There's no prospect of that whatsoever. And I give my personal guarantee in that regard. We'll work with these people because they need health insurance. And as I say, it was a condition. They came here under that visa class, knowing full well that they needed to have private health insurance. And they came here under that visa class ahead of other people that would have been waiting in the queues, perhaps on some of the visas that you're talking about. So they were given preferential treatment because of factors including the fact that they agreed to take out that private health insurance. But they find themselves in a difficult circumstance, and the good thing about the immigration portfolio is that we do have the opportunity on a regular basis, we don't always talk about it publicly, but on a regular basis, to provide support to people who are elderly, kids who are sick, members in the community that have had family breakdown. There are different cases where we can help in a compassionate way, and Ted O'Brien, over a short period of time, has already brought some of those cases in other areas to me, and it's resulted in a very good outcome for those families. So we'll have a look at the individual cases.
Minister, you attended a citizenship ceremony this morning. Being Minister for Immigration, does that have any special poignancy for you to attend a citizenship ceremony?
Yeah, it's a good question. It does. I always enjoy going to citizenship ceremonies. I love to see the young kids who are there. Their parents have made a decision to come to a country, migrate to a country like Australia, and those kids, their grandkids will be the beneficiaries of that decision, because in some cases they've escaped persecution or certain death. If they're coming from a war-torn country, they might have escaped poverty, and they'll work hard, they'll contribute, they'll be good citizens, and they'll make our country a better place. So we're very lucky that they decide to call Australia home. And we have toughened up in terms of our citizenship requirements, because we shouldn't be embarrassed about this as a country. We want the best people to settle here. We want what is great about this country to be protected and enhanced for future generations. And people who flee difficult circumstances, people who have escaped troubles in the world, we don't want them bringing those troubles here, and we want them to abide by Australian laws and Australian values, and that was reflected in the ceremony today. I thought it was a great ceremony, and I thought it was great that it was held at the Nambour RSL as well, because, as I said in my speech there this morning, there is a lot that we owe our veterans for our way of life today. There is a lot of turmoil in the world. You're seeing what's happening even in comparable countries like the United Kingdom, in Manchester, in Paris, in France and elsewhere around the world. We aren't immune from that, and we need to be very mindful that our frontline officers, whether they're police officers or ambulance, fire, whether it's our counter-terrorism police, whether it's our defence forces, these people over a long period of time have made us the great country that they are today. They ensure our freedom and protections today, and it's why I thought it was a great choice that Ted made to hold the ceremony at the Nambour RSL today, and to welcome those people who are Sunshine Coast residents to become Australian citizens. And as I say, it was great to see the young kids there as well, and I think it's a day hopefully that they'll remember for the rest of their lives.
There was a push last March to have the Sunshine Coast declared a refugee welcome zone. A number of councillors have expressed their support too. What are your thoughts? Would you support a region like the coast being declared a refugee welcome zone?
Well, look, I'm not into political stunts. I think people can make statements all they want. The point that I'd make is that we've welcomed almost 850,000 refugees here since the Second World War. We, on a per capita basis, settle more people under the refugee and humanitarian program than any other country in the world except for Canada. So we're an incredibly generous country. And if refugees, any resident really, decides to call the Sunshine Coast home or other parts of the country, I think that's a good thing. And if people adopt our Australian values, they abide by Australian laws, then that's what we can ask from citizens, from new citizens. If we do that, then they'll contribute greatly, like many hundreds of thousands have done before them.